What's up, everybody? How's it going? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. My name is David Castillo from Saint Vitus. Happy Friday, everyone. Sorry I'm running a little bit late, but had a little problem with my internet and my phone. But we got it sorted out. Everything should be cool now. Thanks so much for joining me. I have a really fucking cool guest today. I have Adam Bartlett from Gilead Media and also from Cavern, really cool band. And Adam's been putting out records for a long time with what I think are pretty much some of the underground's just most amazing bands. Everything from Krallis, Thou, I mean, just so much good shit, man. Meesmore just put out a great new record. And yeah, so we're gonna join in with Adam in just 1 second. Let me see if I can find him right here. Here's Gilead. Dog is coming in now too. He wants to get in. Angus, come here. Good. Shout out to Angus. Hey, what's up, Adam? How's it going?
Yo, good. How you doing, man?
Good. Sorry for my tardiness. My phone wasn't really connecting to my internet as well as I'd hoped, and now I think I got it sorted out. I had to do a little router.
No worries.
Little router.
I just took the dogs out anyway, so it worked out.
Yeah. So how's it going, man? Where are you right now?
I'm alive. I'm alive. That's about as good as I can say.
Yeah, totally.
So.
I think that's about where I'm at as well. So I wanted to. Where are you right now? You're in Wisconsin?
Yeah. I'm in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's like an hour and a half north of Milwaukee. This is where I was born. I lived in Ohio for a couple of years, but otherwise, like, I'm literally like in the neighborhood a block away from the house I grew up in when I was a kid. So
oh wow,
we're here.
So
yeah,
so we were born and raised there, Oshkosh, and you. What was it like, kind of growing up around there, and what was some of your earlier kind of musical moments? You know, we like to talk about people's lives in music, so we got to start at the beginning.
Sure. Well, there's kind of like this rich history of music in Wisconsin that a lot of people don't know about. So, I mean, like back in the like 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of these like private press labels, like basically the dudes, like what we look at as like, you know, like what we are familiar with modern day as like DIY punk and metal labels. Back in the 60s and 70s, they just called those like private press labels. It's just some dude in Madison had a press. He was buddies with a guy that had a studio. They'd record garage rock bands. And there's like this rich history of like all this shit from the late 60s and 70s that was really popular in Wisconsin. Just local bands that only did like a 45 or two, right? So like there's a crazy history of all that shit that's kind of like what I think of as like the garage rock equivalent to like the scene we're sort of involved in now, you know? But so like there's this rich history in Wisconsin, but in addition to that, like my personal shit is like my mom played guitar growing up when I was a kid. Like my mom's a musician. She comes from a whole family of musicians. A couple of her brothers have like a private press record, kind of like I'm referring to. Like I just come from a family of people that are like obsessed with music. So my mom playing music and my parents' record collections are what got me into music originally.
Nice. So that's basically what I mean. You came from a musical family. It just started at a young age, and it was sort of all around you and stuff. And you know, the private pressing is really interesting. That there was also a lot of like English labels and stuff like Northern Soul, like things of that nature, which also had these like super small run records. And really, when you think about rock and roll, it wasn't like some serious critically acclaimed art form right away. It was really like, you know, shit for teenagers that like nobody kind of gave a fuck about, right?
Yeah. And exactly, like that's like you said, that I didn't mean to make it seem like that was something that was exclusive to Wisconsin as much as, you know, you're totally right. Like that shit was happening in small pockets all over the place, just like punk and metal is, you know, right now, or has been for the last like 25 years, like really kind of flourishing. Like there's a label called Black Jazz too that had like a lot of really sick, fucking rare, hard to find jazz records that are worth like hundreds of dollars, and those just started getting reissued, which is really, really great. But yeah, like all sorts of genres all over the place. Like I think that's kind of like you were saying, like where music was really kind of like thriving, like real creative music, you know?
Sure, yeah.
Kind of, even though like major labels were putting out like sick shit, like imagine a major label putting out a band like Yes, like these days, you know? Like what the fuck? We're like no major label would fucking do that. So like even though labels were putting out really sick shit, I think it was actually thriving in the like the private press stuff, like you mentioned. You know?
Sure, definitely. But it's cool. Like I honestly, I'm learning here too, because when I think about those things, I think about some things maybe in Detroit, DC with go-go and stuff that I don't think about Wisconsin, and that's something really cool. So I'm learning here. I'm learning my own history right now. So so you kind of grew up musical family and stuff like that, and you're a drummer, right? You play drums a bit. Was that something?
I played drums. Yeah.
Gotcha. So like, did you start playing? What was your sort of like your first sort of participations in kind of like kind of developing your own taste and kind of getting into music when you were like younger, a teenager or whatever?
Yeah. So when I was really young, I fucking loved Johnny Cash. That was like my first favorite artist was Johnny Cash when I'm like 5 or 6 years old, right? Like shit like that. And like as I became a teenager, like growing up, like I was born in the early 80s, so like a lot of the same shit that kids that were graduating high school in the 2000s, like a lot of the same shit, fucking Bush and 311 and No Doubt and stuff like those are my like first favorite bands when I was like discovering music for myself, like I remember fucking sitting in front of the TV with my VCR like ready to record the Deftones My Own Summer video on a VHS tape, because like that was the only fucking way you could watch it. Like you had to record it and like or wait for it to come on TV, so like those, even though I liked a lot of other music like growing up as a kid, like it's just ingrained in people to like enjoy music, right? But like that was when I started like forming my own tastes, like in my early teens and shit. That was the stuff that I gravitated towards a lot more, and then after that it just kind of developed more into looking for edgier shit and heavier shit and stuff like that, and trying to find
everybody kind of has those, I think, moments where you're like, you have what's accessible to you. It's like kind of the bigger sort of like bands of the time or the era or whatever have you, and then you kind of start developing more of your own taste. Maybe you start going down to particular. Sorry about that. And then you kind of find yourself a little bit. So as far as, kind of doing that, what was it like kind of starting to kind of drill down deeper? And what was stuff that you would say kind of like brought you from that sort of like era to kind of like stuff like this?
Yeah, so like I grew up like not super into a lot of metal at all. Like I don't really even like consider myself like a metalhead, even though I put out like a lot of sludge and doom records or work with a lot of those types of bands on the label, like because I think a lot of people that follow the label see that like a lot of these bands I work with still come from like DIY background, like I don't like a band like Thou, they're like a punk band to me more than like they're a DIY band, you know what I mean?
Sure.
A lot of the other bands are too, like the guys from Yellow Eyes, and Mike that plays in Yellow Eyes and 12 Voices, like, dude, he was in like hardcore bands not too long ago. Like a lot of these people come from like DIY and punk and shit. So that's kind of like what my own evolution was. I was familiar with a lot of the popular metal or like new metal shit that everyone was into when they were like a young kid in high school my age. And there was like one day where like some kid came to school in high school, like one of the older dudes that I thought was like a cool guy, when I was like a freshman, wearing a Hatebreed shirt, right? And like I was like, that logo is sick, and I want to like know what that is. And that was like the first band that led me to discovering like Victory Records, and like kind of like my first kind of like exploration of like actual like hardcore
and
tough
also,
guy stuff.
And at that time too, Victory really, what it was associated with was just like, it was really like a world, it was like, who are these kids talking about veganism and straight edge?
Exactly.
And like, it was, and everything that was more on the metallic side of hardcore that was blowing up, right, was really associated with that. Those early Victory style comps, a lot of stuff. I mean, it influenced, it was like a whole universe to kind of walk into. And so I similarly to you, had like a lot of, I like walked into that and I was like, whoa, kind of like, what is this? Where am I? And some of those bands were really influential to me, like Dead Guy and so on.
Fuck yeah.
Absolutely. So that was kind of your first experience with kind of hardcore and stuff. And then did you kind of immediately start going to shows and trying to kind of like, just participate and vibe with that? Was a lot of hardcore coming to your area?
Well, it wasn't really like stuff coming to my area. Like I had to, like once I discovered the Victory Records shit and like I started discovering actual like underground punk and hardcore, like I had to drive an hour and a half to Milwaukee or 3 hours to Chicago to go to shows,
Wow.
And so like I went to see like Botch and Seven Angels, Seven Plagues when We Are the Romans came out, and it was like my first big Milwaukee, like not big because it was a fucking tiny show in a club, but like it was the first like sick Milwaukee show I went to, where I walked in and I was like totally out of my fucking element, totally like exposed firsthand to the whole like metalcore, hardcore subculture for the first time. And then the first time I went to a show in Chicago at the Fireside Bowl, it was All Out War and Dying Fetus. And it was just like dudes fighting like all night, like the local hardcore kids and the metal dudes just fighting all night. And like it was terrifying to me, like at 16 years old, being in Chicago for the first time, like at this like serious shit like show,
Yeah, those are.
But that's what a lot of what I had to do was like it was driving to Milwaukee and driving to Chicago all the fucking time for shows. But it was great, like I loved it, like obviously like you had a similar trajectory. Like when you start going to those shows when you're young and like you see the energy and the community and like experience that firsthand, like dude, there's like this is it, this is fucking it, like this is the sickest thing I've ever seen. Like
yeah.
Beings
can act that way. I say it all the time on the show, but I was just like, I can't even believe this is like preposterous. Like, how the fuck? Like, what are we doing here? It was like, like almost like just not like a culture you'd never sort of like seen before. But it was under my nose, but it felt like super foreign. But I loved the energy. It just like could not get enough of it. And even like you, like, see, I asked that question because I'm like a spoiled bitch. Like amazing bands were like literally lived 2 towns over from me on Long Island, and I grew up an hour outside of New York City. So I always, I think, have this sort of warped sense, at least with the rest of the country, about like what hardcore and like what would come or whatever, But I still travel to Jersey or sometimes even to Boston to go see shows and kind of take it in, because I was just like super obsessed and into that sort of stuff. But for you and for other people I know, that's the bare minimum to even get that. So that's quite commitment to sort of make it happen. Did you were you bumming rides with friends, or like what was the crew like, or was it just
I was
kind of warrioring out?
It was, I mean, when you're that young though, dude, like, you know what I mean? Like it's, you don't even fucking think twice about it though, like driving 2 towns over versus driving an hour. Like that's just what we had to do to like do cool shit around here. Like we just had to drive to Milwaukee or Chicago, like. So yeah, there's like a whole handful of people that were from either the area around here, or like people that were going to college here from out of town. Like once we were all like 19, 20 years old, and we'd have like a car full or a couple carfuls of people that would go to shows. Like, dude, I was like working in the record store one day, like when I was a kid, and my buddy calls me. He's like, we didn't even like this is so fucking, I can't imagine this even happening these days. But he calls me and he's like, dude, Dillinger Escape Plan and Candiria are playing in Milwaukee tonight, and we didn't, like, it's like 4 hours before the show, and like we didn't even know. So like a whole like 6 people loaded up in a car, and we just fucking went, like it's just what you did. Like it's just what we had to do shit.
So let me ask you about the record store, because obviously records are a big part of your life, and obviously you have like one of the great underground metal record labels by my estimation. And also, I feel like when you get into hardcore, record collecting is a big part of hardcore culture. And that was that like where you were sort of introduced to sort of that aspect of that? And then when did you start kind of working at a record store and started getting into the like kind of record collecting and vinyl collecting culture?
Sure. So when I started working at the record store, I was like 17 years old. So it was 2000, and vinyl was like dead in the fucking water. Nobody wanted it. And I can't remember, like the first fucking record I ever bought, I think was actually like a Deftones 7-inch single that I bought on eBay or some shit like that. And that was like the beginning of my own record collection. And after that, it was just, like exactly like you said, like hardcore records and punk records were still being pressed on vinyl. People were still buying that shit. So I just started like stocking the store with this punk and hardcore stuff just so I could buy it, basically, So that was like totally like you said, that's totally the beginning of like my interest in vinyl.
What store was it by chance?
Yeah, the record store I worked at when I was a kid is called The Exclusive Company, and it's like a chain in the Wisconsin area. That's actually like the one I worked at was the second one they opened back in the 60s. So it's officially like one of the oldest record stores in the US that carries all types of music.
Whoa.
Like been open since the 60s, and because there's some record stores in like I want to say like Tennessee or some shit, like Nashville, that are older but are like country western stores, if they're even still open. I don't know. But like, so the store I worked at when I was a kid was like one of the oldest record stores in the country. So that's like where I started out. Like I just would go in there every week and like punish them about shit, you know? Like I was just like the Punisher kid that would be always looking for like imports of dumb shit that I read about on a forum or whatever. And eventually they just like, they're like, do you just want to work here? We need somebody and you're in here all the fucking time. Do you just want a job? It was like a total like sympathy thing. Like they wouldn't have to train me because I knew everything. And like I was there anyway. So they just started paying
them into submission. Like,
yeah.
Like,
which is like how I operate still. Like the bands, like I punish them until they will work with me. That's it.
But that's amazing though, because it just shows the passion, and sometimes it's just participating, just showing up, being passionate about things. It gets you places and stuff too. I mean, my story is not really all that different. I give a shit and I'm interested, you know, like it all starts there. So they let you kind of curate your own section and be the buyer of most of the punk hardcore stuff. Is that what
I was like the lead indie buyer. So like I was ordering all the punk and hardcore and indie shit. Like, you know, after I like learned how the shit worked, you know. But yeah, essentially that was the drill.
That's cool.
So.
Were you playing in any bands at the time or at all? Or, you know, was playing like at all in sort of your in like a thing that you wanted to do, or did you do any other things like zine stuff, anything else, or has it been really focused mostly towards like records? And we'll get into obviously establishing Gilead and doing all these sorts of things.
Well, you play, aside from doing the electronic music stuff, you play in bands too, right?
Yeah, I played in Primitive Weapons for like 9 years or so, and I played in White Widow's Pact for a while as well. Those are two bands that I was in, and then now I make techno in my room, which is kind of good for this sort of climate. But between me and you, before all this fucking bullshit happened, I was jamming with Mick Barr and Greg Fox. So there you go. Yeah, so I've always played. That was always
So like, so you probably like, we probably have like a, you know, like once you're involved or start going to punk and hardcore shows, if you want to be involved, like, dude, like, if you're already inclined to like wanting to be involved in like the energy of like the punk and hardcore scene, like you want to fucking be on that stage, you want to be on that floor performing, you know, like once you see people doing that and see the crowd reacting, like, I don't know, for me anyway, like I was like, I crave that feeling, like being able to like be surrounded by that energy, not like the attention of the people, but like more like feeding off the energy of those people live. Cause like, when I go to a live show, that's, you know, like when I'd go see Converge when I was a kid at the Fireside Bowl, you know, touring for Jane Doe or whatever. Like, yeah, it was sick to go see Converge live, but 50 to 75% of that is how fucking insane the crowd was. Like, I was in fear of my safety at certain points, you know, because it was just like the energy, like the live energy, like that fucking, that's what gets me. And so I mean, yeah, naturally, like I wanted to be in bands and shit. I ended up being like doing vocals in like a metalcore band in Milwaukee during like the height of, you know, 2002 to 2003 when metalcore, like right before it kind of broke, you know, like became like popular culture shit. That I was like, fuck, you know, like all the melodic, fuck, everything that Seven Angels, Seven Plagues kind of inspired, you know, if you were familiar with them at all, like the really fucking melodic emo ass kid metalcore, but still like tough sounding, you know, like that's the shit that I was like a part of in the Milwaukee scene for a couple of years. But I don't know, like after that, like, man, I don't know, like these days when we do like Cavern Light shit, the band that I'm in now, like, I mean, we haven't fucking even played together in a year, but like I don't know, man, like I don't really like I don't like playing shows anymore. Like I feel like maybe I'm just too old for that shit. Like it's a lot of work and stress, and I'm kind of like over it. And I just kind of like want to let I still like going to shows, but like I don't really like crave it like I used to when I was a kid, you know.
Got it. Well, and then that's an honest and fair assessment. And I think that everyone kind of has like a role to play, right? Like I feel like
Right.
I've always played, but I've also really always liked to kind of organize happenings and stuff. I'm like pretty good at a party. So I figured that ever since I was a kid, I always found myself able to like put the show together. The first show I ever threw was a show/barbecue where we had the bands play, and it was like my friends, like local punk bands, and then we took all the money from the door and threw a barbecue afterwards. That was like, and I called it Show-BQ. I was like a natural from the get.
Totally.
But it was also just about kind of creating. I really wanted to like kind of create the experience, and I thought I could be good with it. And then playing was just kind of like another side of the coin. But I obviously found a home sort of doing that, and then therefore. Kind of really unexpectedly, this sort of turning into this whole thing with Vitus, which has been obviously a huge part of my life. When were you like, hey, I think that putting out records and being part of this side of like the scene and the coin could be like a good fit for me and like the kind of stuff that I want to do?
Sure. That's a really good question. I like what you said about how there's a place, there's a role for everybody.
Yeah.
Because like I think that's one thing that like a lot of people that are, I gotta be in a band. I gotta go be in a band. Like being in a band kind of sucks, dude. Like it's a lot of work. And it's like you're married to like 4 other fucking people or whatever, like there's a reason that like a lot of these dudes are like one-man bands. Cause like it sucks dealing with people. It sucks organizing schedules. Being on the road fucking kind of sucks. Like you play a show for what, 35, 40 minutes. And like, that might be cool. But then like, you're all complaining about loading your shit. You're all complaining about not getting money from the bar, whatever. Like there's so many other ways to like be involved in like the cool shit, like you said, whether it's through booking people and meeting all these fucking bands, like which I love that aspect of like having a fest, is like meeting all these people, or through putting out the record. I mean, when I moved to Ohio, to like get to your actual question, when I moved to Ohio, I was working for a company called Lumberjack Distribution that would distribute punk and hardcore labels to retail stores.
Yeah, I remember Lumberjack for sure.
Yeah, it was really great for a while. So like I worked there doing sales and marketing shit, and there were other dudes there that ran labels, and that's when I was kind of like, oh, running the labels fucking not that difficult. Like if you have some money, $2,000 to throw down on like getting something duplicated and can get it distributed and place a couple ads or whatever and just like try to get the word out on the internet. Like that's I don't know, man. I much prefer that over like writing music and writing lyrics and being in a band these days.
Sure. And like you said, it's like might be the strength for you and like what you like to do and bring, because we're all part of like this ecosystem, right? Without people like yourself, myself, or like Mick Barr, like it doesn't work, and so we need all of that to hopefully, when it works well, it rows in the same direction and like really great moments. And somebody had like some job along the way or whatever that really like exposed them to certain skills that like would come back to play a part in the story. So for you, you just like took a job with a record distributor, not too different right after like working at a record store. All right, seems natural. But then it kind of gave you like, I see what these motherfuckers are doing. I could do it myself. So when you started Gilead, what was like kind of the point of view? What were you trying to sort of accomplish with it? Obviously, you're like, okay, I know I can kind of take the challenge on behind the scenes. But what was it like? Oh, okay, like what do I want to put out there? Like what was the aesthetic approach?
So like, I'm sure you're familiar. Like at the time, Magic Bullet Records and fucking Hydra Head was like on a tear, man, like fucking incredible. Robotic Empire, fucking sick bunch of releases. Like those were all labels that kind of like I already loved and were distributed by this company. And I looked at those and I was like, all right, so my favorite labels right now, like are releasing music that breaks the mold, like I know that you can kind of, you listen to like ISIS and you can kind of track the trajectory. All right, here's their influences. You know, and Aaron Turner, I know, has been pretty vocal about like his own influences, writing ISIS stuff or whatever, along with, you know, other dudes in the band. But that band fucking, like, no one sounded like them. Nobody sounded like them when it came down to it, you know? And like bands on Magic Bullet, like it was punk and hardcore and screamo stuff, but he was putting out shit that was like cream of the fucking crop or like late level plain record stuff. You know, I looked at all these labels and I was like, what do I love about these? All right, all these dudes are putting out like really sick shit within a scene that we love, but like breaks a mold in some way. There's something different about all this. Like there's a different vibe to all of this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at that and I was like, I just thought about it that way. Like, all right, I want to put out records that can appeal to these people that I'm already like going to shows with, but that I feel like offers something a little bit different or has a little bit of a twist on it. So I kind of just started looking, you know, I put out a couple friends bands records, and real soon through connections I had at the distributor, I realized that licensing, vinyl was still nothing. This is like 2004, 2005. Nobody gave a fuck about vinyl.
No, I mean, at the time,
Right.
everything was CD, right?
Mm-hmm.
New technology.
Yep. So I was collecting records, and my friends were collecting records, and I was like, this Appleseed Cast record's never been on fucking vinyl before.
Yeah.
It sold like a ton of copies. Everyone that's into like emo underground bullshit loves these records, and they've never been on vinyl. So I just hit up the label and was like, hey, you want to license me the rights to do the vinyl? We worked out a deal. Bam, first vinyl release. Like my fourth record I ever did was a fucking triple LP by like one of the best like emo bands I think ever, of their two like some fucking landmark records, you know, part one and part two together.
In fact, when I was doing this, like, you know, I kind of came into Gilead more actually sort of through Krallis and stuff like that, but then I was like, I know this name, why? And it was like, whoa, Me Without You records and other stuff like that I was, Cancer Conspiracy, stuff that I'm thinking about way back, and I was just like, oh fuck, really? Like this is what we're doing now? And really kind of like flipped the script for me a little bit. So for you, you actually just licensed those records to put them onto vinyl. Smooth move.
Yeah. So I mean, and like, thank God, like, dude, I had fucking no business doing that. I was just some fucking guy that like self-released a CD for like my band, like a split between my band at the time and another band, and then like this band, A Scanner Darkly, that was all Philip K. Dick inspired, like sludgy tech, weird proggy metal stuff with a bunch of synth, and then like an atmospheric ambient record that my friends did. And then I was like, fuck it, you know, like no one at Tooth and Nail had any reason to respond to my fucking emails.
Sure.
But they did. And I was able to license those two Me Without You records that people consider like life-changing albums for the time that they came out, you know?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Like, people fucking absolutely love those records and consider them like just, you know, like classics at this point, you know, like Stone Cold classics for that kind of stuff. And that kind of like really, I guess, set the scene for you becoming something that sort of like felt a lot more legitimate after that, right? Like, it's like,
oh. Yeah, I had to. Like, I all of a sudden I was like, fuck, I'm putting out records that have sold tens of thousands of copies on CD. Like, and I mean, I'm not really that legitimate still. Like, it's just me at my record store, and then like the record store staff helps with like mail order, and then Shannon, you know Shannon, right? She like that from Perfect World PR. Like she does all the PR shit, you know? But like, so I'm not like I'm still just some fucking guy that's like reading everyone's messages and emails about their tracking numbers and stuff myself, you know? But like those records definitely made me realize, like, all right, I can like actually fucking do this. At the time I had like no business working on records that fucking big.
Sure.
But I just like sent some emails and fucking made it happen, you know? Like, which is like I'm sure you are with like having your history in music and booking and everything. Like, you just gotta fucking send some emails and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you just kind of think that you're maybe building something that has like, you know, some sort of point of view or integrity or whatever have you, and that people would want to work with something like that. You know, like for us, our intent was pretty clear. It's like we felt this void in New York City for like this sort of like rock metal style venue that it kind of, there's this sort of gap that happened because of Giuliani. And we were like, all right, you know, like we're from here, and like this is sort of bullshit. Like we don't have like a real spot to like go and play. And
Which is fucked up to think about. Like, how is there not like a fucking punk metal like bar in New York? Like, how is there even a void for that? Like, that's so sick that you guys are able to just like be like, we're gonna do this because it needs to happen. Like,
yeah, everything was really pretty fucking beat, man. To be really honest at the end, like I grew up on Long Island, so I grew up going to the great clubs. Like, you know, what we're doing is not like Coney Island High and CB's and stuff like that. We respect, you know, like that's we're
yeah,
taking,
but man, like no one at the time thinks they're doing that.
yeah.
Like everyone's only thinking about what inspired them, you know, like where, I don't know, that like me being from like a small town in the Midwest, like I know Vitus is like not a huge place, but it's fucking sick. Like I've been there, you know, like, and like where else do you fucking play? Like there's been some fucking incredible shows there, you know, like
Sure. And I've had my me without you like kind of moments, right, where I'm just throwing the Hail Mary, like who the fuck does, hey, Scott Kelly.
But that's how shit happens.
You know, like, and sometimes it works, but I think it's a lot of it is because of just the intent and what you're trying to put out there. So what I wanted to ask is kind of, all right, you know, I listened to these Carlos records and I went back and I was like, oh shit, this is the earlier stuff, and I remembered it because to me it kind of almost had like a J Tree energy to like the early Gilead stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was cool because it was like Strike Anywhere and then like a mile marker, like it was diverse and cool, but of like a diaspora. So when did you kind of start kind of building it more into being this sort of like underground, like more metal leaning label, and what was the idea towards the direction? I mean, vinyl is obviously central to this story, and I feel like that's that, but then the point of view started shifting, right? What was that all like?
So that's a really good question, and I'm surprised, like most people don't pick up on that, but it was like a super conscious choice, so I'm like kind of surprised that you asked. But like,
dog, I know it all.
When I started putting out Thou records, honestly, like, you know, that was my 16th release was Tyrant, their first full length. You know, all they had was like a tour version of that CD. Andy Lowe from Robotic Empire literally sent me an email and was like, hey dude, these guys are sick, I can't work with them right now, it's right up your alley. And I heard it and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, what? And I like emailed Brian from Thou like that fucking day, you know? And that's the evolution of time between that and like my 23rd release was Corrales' self-titled record.
Yeah.
So that span of time over those like 6 or 7 releases, even though I really enjoyed doing like some indie rock shit, you know, like stuff like Me Without You, which I can't, it's hard for me to classify sometimes.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Like I love all that shit still, dude. I listen to so much of that stuff. I listen to tons of hardcore. Like some of my favorite records from this year were like that Mil-Spec record that came out. I think Locking Out Records, like one of my favorite records of the year. I listen to tons of punk and hardcore still.
Oh yeah,
right?
Same. You know, Gulch.
Yeah.
Gulch has been on rotation. Strange Martyr from last year. I'm always
the cover stuff. The cover art on that Gulch record, dude, is like, I was just talking to my buddy Mike and some other folks about this when we were talking about music. I like that Gulch record, but that fucking cover art on that Gulch record is like my favorite cover. Like it looks like a fucking 70s prog record. Like,
it does. It looks so,
you know?
It's not, like, it's beautiful and like legitimately beautiful, and the music's so ugly, but it's in a good way. I love the kind of dichotomy there. But and that's what's so cool though, is like vinyl, everything that you doing, you know, Robotic Empire, you know, people like Closed Casket and the hardcore world and stuff. There's these beautiful vinyl releases, great packaging and stuff like that, and really connecting the aesthetics back to the music. And so for you, like you were just saying, it was like the Thou release, and then actually having a label that you consider an inspiration and now kind of like a peer, kind of gave you sort of some of the material to kind of, or you know, to kind of start on your way down this path. That must feel pretty fucking cool that they would trust you to do it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, oh, totally. Like when a dude from like one of my biggest influences of a label like is like, hey, check out this band, especially looking back now and being like, dude, if I never would have put out a Thou record, I would not be doing this still. You know, I wouldn't have put out because I'll tell you right now, I only put out that fucking Corrales record. Well, I put out actually Colin's early solo project in Rico there that was like programmed instrumental tech death metal shit. Fucking loved it because he was in that band Behold the Octopus. I'm sure you're familiar, right?
Love him, yeah.
Like
an Ultra Dolphin or whatever the fuck that was.
Yeah, so like when I fucking loved Behold the Octopus, dude. Like,
Sick.
I saw them back in the day, like tour with Genghis Tron, I think it was maybe.
I saw that show in New York City. Love
Yeah.
Genghis Tron, man.
Yeah. Dude, and yeah, Genghis Tron, man, like you want to talk about bands breaking the fucking mold, but still having like amazing appeal. Like, dude, when that first EP came out, man, and when Dead Mountain Mouth, fuck, like,
yeah, and like
I was like, these
what
guys,
was
this
last
is
one,
the
Lord of
fucking
the House. I love that one
Yeah.
too. Great stuff.
Yep.
Absolutely. But it was a very experimental and like really crazy time. I feel like that particular time with Hydra Head, Robotic Empire, a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of just like sort of expansive, like everyone sort of pushing the sounds out to the edges. You had Colin, you know, kind of doing what he's doing. You had Genghis Tron. You had, you know, kind of Converge going this way. Daughters with like, you know, like just hell songs. Like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, because that's when Daughters just started getting weird. Yeah.
And everything started kind of scattering around, which is really cool. And other influences were really pushing in, from electronics to an IDM to like fucking, you know, to metal, like actual, like, you know, actual like virtuosity from like a metal standpoint, but like also kind of exploded a bit. And I feel like Gilead was right in that sort of conversation, and you kind of pushed that conversation forward with the with the label. And was that kind of like the statement of intent once you kind of found some of the stuff? Let me just kind of keep digging and digging and digging.
I feel like, yeah, you know, because I've always, like, you know, we talked about Dillinger Escape Plan. I talked about Botch, Converge era, like beginning through When Forever Comes Crashing and that split with Agoraphobic Nosebleed was my favorite fucking music that's ever been made. Like, you know, like back then, like it was when I fucking heard, because the first thing I bought that was like metal-ish was that Converge Agoraphobic Nosebleed split, and I was like, oh, it's on Relapse. It's a Converge related. Like, I've heard these people talk about Converge. Like, cool, I'll check it out. And like that fucking defined what I liked about like chaotic, experimental, like electronic-y noise, and, you know, here in the Agoraphobic Nosebleed side, like Pig Destroyer related, programmed drums, like tons of noisy shit. Like that defined, like you're saying, like what I liked about like music that was breaking the mold, you know? And like Hydra Head, I feel like Hydra Head back in the day had a thing that was, I don't remember if they coined it or someone else did, but Thinking Man's Metal. You remember that tag?
Yes.
Like, I don't remember who said that, but like I tried to internalize that, even though I think like someone might have meant it as a joke at some point, or like I was like, that's actually a fucking really good way to put it. And like I don't think I necessarily like tried to put out like intellectual shit, because I'm not intellectual like at all, but I just like shit that's breaking the mold. So like, you know, you asked about when I wanted to like focus the label a little bit more, and you know, I mentioned like, so the Thou had a split with Leech, and I wasn't super into black metal. I'd listened to a bunch of it and was like, that stuff doesn't grab me that much. Like, it just didn't do anything for me. At, you know, the stuff that I had heard, that like a lot of the classic black metal stuff that all my friends were listening to, I was just like, it just doesn't, nothing about this super appeals to me, you know? And I listened to Leech because Thou was going to do a split with them, and there's this band from Salem, Oregon, and it was like really progressive sounding. It was like a 17-minute long song. The bass playing on it was fucking bonkers. It had really cool melodies. It was just different. It was so fucking different. And I was like, this is sick. And that was the moment that I was like, this is what I like.
Got it.
And if I wouldn't have put out that Thou Leech split and checked out Leech, you know, like that really set the stage for me. Like that was ahead of the curve of like this huge wave of US black metal stuff that I somehow like, with Ashbore and Fell Voices and Corrales and all these other bands that were like kind of the first bands that I worked with in that style. Like Leech was ahead of all that. And like, obviously, like a lot of people, well, I don't know how many people know, but Paul from Leech went on to be in Blood Incantation. Like that, it's the same dude.
Yeah.
Right? So like, he was so far ahead of the fucking curve with this stuff. And I think like what he did with Leech kind of like influenced a lot of these people. And like, he was booking shows at this punk house in Salem that like Hell and Mizmor and Ashbore, like Ashbore wasn't from there, but played there. And like Thou had played there, and like these other bands like Hell and Mismore kind of developed out of that. Nate that did Eternal Warfare and like does the Project Mania. Like he was out of this house, this Burial Grounds house, and like it started such a fucking insane period of music.
Totally.
And that
totally
like
agree.
Yeah, like for me to be like adjacent to that was like really fucking exciting, because I like that was like fine. I'm like, all right, stuff like Ashbore and Fell Voices, that was the beginning of me being like, this is the type of black metal that I can get in. Like this is for some reason I connect with. Like I feel this.
And
when
to
I
be
have
honest with you as well, or I think it's just this is natural listening experience, and I would be kind of advise people to do this. Like, not everyone's going, no matter what the genre is, or whatever the perceived genre is too. Like, you might be able to find something, right? Like whatever it may be, you know. Like for some people, they like the more bedroom sort of ambient sounds, black metal. For some people, it's like kind of this mix of sort of like American screamo and shoegaze stuff that really, you know, Portraits of Past or something like that. So for other people, it might be just like, dude, I love Bathory, really riffy, like nasty, one tail, one head kind of style stuff too. And that's just one genre, you know, like keep exploring. I think this is a great kind of tale of like keeping exploring and kind of being close to, I think, maybe artists and maybe a community of creatives that kind of led you down this sort of path, right? You're like, well, if Thou, whom I love, is like kind of co-signing this band, why, right? And then you asked yourself the hard question, and then you were like, cool, I'm gonna like kind of keep working with that. The moving kind of forward, that stuff I think is all very like Gilead-y, I think, in a way where like people who are now into the label, they really sort of feel that there's a lot of that sort of stuff. But I gotta talk about two releases particularly that I really like off the label recently that I think is almost like the third turn here, but I don't think have been really brought up, which is I feel like there's a little bit of noise rock that's creeped in. I love that Buildings record. I think it's so fucking cool. And I love noise rock, man. You know, like I love Insane and Jesus Lizard and the Cows and Laughing Hyenas. Like I'm a fan of it. And that's, you know, if we're going back to the Wisconsin thing, that's like right next fucking door, right? And then Wailing Storms too has a little bit of that as well. What kind of started pulling some of those sounds? And it seems like a more recent sort of like thing for you guys or for you.
So So Kowloon City, they were like, dude, like one of the best bands in North America, like hands down, I think, especially live. Like,
what was that?
Incredible.
Container Ships?
Container Ships. That was the one that Brutal Panda did, and then I did Grievances, and then I reissued.
Okay, dude, money in the fucking bank, dude. I love them. I would have them play every weekend.
But Container Ships, I agree, dude. That's the one where I heard them and I was like, fucking Christ! Like, I already liked a handful of noise rock shit, you know. But they were the band that all of a sudden I was like, this can bleed over. Like this, you know, I knew there were enough people like you and I that liked plenty of metal shit and also like noise rock stuff, you know, like the bands you mentioned. And that was when Kowloon City did, I was like, I feel like this makes sense. Like this can work. And so it was them, and Couch Slut was, you know, one of the big ones. Like,
how could I forget? I want to, because Take a Chance on Rock and Roll, great record, one of my favorites this year.
And like of all the visceral music that's out there, like Couch Slut, like not just like live and recorded, which for me, like personally, like I have a hard time, like, I don't know. Some bands I just prefer the record because some bands can't do it live, and they're so fucking visceral live and recorded. Like they capture like the essence of what like rock and roll and noise rock like should be, like the fucking absolute energy, like cranked all the way up. Like, so there's that, and like you said, the Buildings Will and Serve. Dude, I would love to do more of that shit. Like noise rock stuff, like heavy noise rock shit. There's a really great band that Megan from Couchlet turned me on to, Rectal Hygienics. That's from Chicago.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that band. Like fuck, and like someone in the comments said Ken Mode. Like Ken Mode, fucking incredible band. Really? You know, like, and all of them are really great examples.
The brothers.
Yeah, like so that's just like such a great example of like noise rock that appeals to like the metal crowd, you know?
Yeah, I think
And
that's
like,
something where I feel like that sort of music, right, has needed a bit of a home in a way. I feel like, you know, there's been it's been a little like decentralized, and maybe a band would pop up here or there, but it feels like you're kind of investing in it and cultivating it a little bit more, which I really love. And as a listener, I appreciate, because I love so much of that stuff. And I love the comments popping off of Fight Amp and Ken Mode, and like there are a lot of great bands, Horrors, you know, like lots of lots of really cool stuff and interesting, and Brutal Panda being one where some of that stuff pops off. And now I feel like Gilead too, and it's cool to have just a little bit of a place where like, yo, this is what this sort of exists here, and I like it kind of next to some of this metal stuff. I think what you choose could really, you know, go right next to some of these things. Like a Couch Slut does have some of these kind of black metal-y na 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 na, like, you know, kind of like almost DBD parts to it too. So that's a really beautiful sort of thing. So I just wanted to kind of call that out before, you know,
sure.
because I see what you're doing, and I really fucking appreciate it.
You're very fucking observant. You really you kind of cut through to like a lot of the shit that I'm thinking like behind the scenes here that I don't think anybody notices. But
yeah,
like,
you know, I give a shit and I pay attention.
Yeah.
So just remember. So the other thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, we have maybe another like 10 minutes or so left, but you know, you have obviously the label, and that's great. And I love kind of the different, you know, kind of turns and the aesthetics and stuff. But there are two more things that I'm curious about. One is like, okay, so you're obviously always like listening to stuff, and you think certain bands are great, and maybe whatever, you're fans of a band or whatever. But what's it like, okay, I want to try and make the commitment to work with somebody. What kind of tips things in the skills for you to go, hey, I really love this band, I have to pursue it, or whatever have you?
Man, it's hard to say. Like it's something that if it's someone cool, like, I don't know. When I first heard about False, I haven't even heard them yet. I was sitting at a coffee shop in Madison with Andy and Brian from Thou and Lee and Chip from The Body, because they were all on tour together. And they're like, dude, we just played in Minneapolis they're like the best black metal band we ever played with. Brian's like, Adam, you gotta check them out. You gotta fucking hear this band. I'm gonna put out their record, you should put it out with me. And I'm like, all right, dude, just like having a friend, like, honestly, like I know we can't have, like, there's this whole period of time where we're not gonna have live shows, but when it can happen again, and prior to all this, I was telling people, like, you know, people would ask, like, how do I get someone's attention? It's like, dude, you need to fucking play shows, and you need to put out a tape of your demo, and you need to go on tour, and you need to like be legitimately chill with other bands. Because like, dude, 12 Voices and Ash Borer, like, vouched for by the guys from Thou, like a handful of other bands vouched for by other bands that I've worked with. Like, having like the initial foundation being laid for, like, a lot of those by just someone being like, oh yeah, we played with them, they're sick, they're really nice. And I'll be like, okay. Or, you know, straight up like, they're friends of ours, you should check it out. Cool, then I'll check it out. Because like, just like listeners and viewers out there are being like, there's so much fucking music to listen to. Like, people like us, like, dude, you booking, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. Like, just fucking new shit. You can't even fucking ingest it all. It's impossible, you know? So like, honestly, like that's like a super strong foundation for me to like check some shit out. After that, just the same barometer that I've worked by since 2005. Like, does this grab me? Like, is it something that appeals to me on like a fundamental level? Does it invoke some like emotional response? Like, do I feel like it's doing something a little different in some way, or something that I enjoy? You know, like, because there's plenty of bands that I love that they don't really do something that's like super different, but they do it really fucking good.
Yeah.
And like, they have a really unique,
or maybe they fit better or maybe they fit better in another place. It doesn't have to be something that you personally like take on, and you're like, yeah, this is cool, this could, almost like Robotic Empire said, you know, you can't work with everybody too, and maybe for somebody else it's like, maybe that'll fit over here a little bit more than being something that you decide to sort of take on. But that's a cool thing that you said too, and I think it's important for people out here who are listening, who are in bands, or, you know, putting stuff together and stuff. A lot of it is like, it's a community driven thing that we're doing here. So it is really true. You know, I get, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, I got this great band, or you get this cold email and stuff like that. And I'm like, I need to kind of like, I want you to make a little bit of a stir, or maybe some people that I know talking to you about this sort of group and stuff is always going to be the first thing that gets to me. If a friend of mine goes, yo, this is fucking good. And I'm like, what is it? I listen to it like immediately, you know? And so that, you can't fake the funk. That's just like hard work and like doing cool shit. And hopefully those things kind of happen for you, and so on and so forth. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is you do a lot of design for the label, right?
I do, like, I handle like a lot of the technical layout. I'm like not an illustrator. I cannot fucking illustrate, but I can take like other bullshit that people send me and like throw it in the layout and have it done, you know?
Yeah, get it like kind of arranged and stuff like that. So you're wearing, obviously, as a kind of a one-man band, along with your stores employees, you're wearing many, many different hats to kind of get all of this stuff done. And it's a ton of work. I mean, I know I've done that for myself and for other people, and it ain't easy, but you also get to sort of help these artists on their journey and also kind of create with them. For you, you've been doing this for a long time. What's something that still excites you and that makes you want to, like, you know, kind of just stay in the game and be doing it? Because I think that you're doing it at a great level, and you're constantly putting out cool music, and you're still pushing it, like we just said, with all this cool noise rock stuff you're doing now alongside the metal and everything else.
Man, that's a good question. It's like, honestly, it's fucking hard to like stay excited and engaged after like 15 years sometimes, you know, like, because the label, like, quite frankly, I've always run it as like the hobby thing. Like, I don't like take a bunch of paychecks from the label. Like, it really just sustains itself. I reinvest the money back into it. Like, that's why I started like my record store. And prior to that, before I had a physical record store, it was like an online distro. Because like I wanted that to be my job. I wanted the label to do it. Like, I didn't want to like not put out a band because we're only going to sell 300 of the record. If I really fucking love the record, I want to put it out even if we're only going to sell 300 of them, you know? And like for a lot of people that run a label more like a business, which is totally fine. You know, like I have no beef with that whatsoever. Like I'm friends with tons of these dudes that run labels like on a more business level than me. That I think that can kind of, it not necessarily hinder, but it has an impact. It changes your decision-making process. And I want the label to be, even though it's like, it's hard to say it's fun, dude. Like, you know, like people always say like, do what you love and you never work. And dude, you fucking work way harder doing the shit you love, but you hate it less at the end of the week, even though like you're fucking working way harder at it because you care so much about what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's always like kind of the misnomer. It's like, actually, no.
I'm working harder, actually.
You'll work really fucking hard, and sometimes it like kills you. But at the same time, there are moments that also, yes, you would imagine, like, you're like, holy fuck, like Neurosis is playing and it's not on the stereo. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, you know, you do sometimes, you know, migration festivals happen. I'm like, look at this. This is my label come to life in front of me, right? So, you know, that's really interesting, and that balance is always really key. And you're also now, I mean, you've been doing this, like you said, 15 years in, a long time. Mike from Mutilation Rights, great band that's, you know, been part. He also mentioned to me that he's been working with you on also kind of pulling a lot of stuff to put together a little like documentary on Gilead, which is really cool. How long has that been sort of going out, and any kind of deal, you know, with that? You like any like what's going to go on with it?
So I gotta say real quick, when I first worked with Mutilation Rights, I met them at a show in Appleton, like just north of here, like a punk town where there was a really great little scene there. I should have mentioned this earlier when you asked about local shit, but there was this fucking sick basement show scene in Appleton, which is just 20 minutes north of me, and tons of fucking great bands would come through. Thou played in the basements there, tons of great bands. But Mutilation Rights played in Appleton a couple times, and I met them, and just being like, all right, these guys are from New York City. They play like this grimy black and roll, black metal shit. and just how they you fucking know Mike. You see his like when he's in mutilation rights mode, you know, and like Justin and all those guys back, you know, like they don't look like friendly dudes, right? But ended up being like, the sweetest bunch of guys. Like, dude, Mike, like the sweetest bunch of fucking dudes. Like everyone in that fucking band, like Mike is the sweetest guy. Like he's come to Oshkosh and hung out a bunch. Whenever I'm in New York City, I stay at his place. He's like the sweetest fucking dude that, you know, one of the sweetest people I've met doing the label. Really grateful to have him as a friend. So, some people don't know this, but Mike from Mutilation Rights edited and did a lot of the heavy lifting on Until the Light Takes Us, which I know you know. And then he also did, you know, circling back a little bit to the noise rock, he did the Color of Noise documentary about Amphetamine Reptile Records, which is like one of the most important fucking labels, the most important fucking label in noise rock, right?
No doubt.
Yeah. So Mike shot a lot of the footage and edited those, and he came to me and he's like, all right, I want to do something about, you know, I just finished The Color of Noise, the Amphetamine Reptile documentary, and I'm capturing all of these stories and all of this, like it's everyone reminiscing about shit from 20 to 30 years ago. And he's like, there's this scene that we're a part of right now. How great would it be to capture some of that right now?
Sure.
And I was super fucking resistant to it. I did not want to do it. I did not want anything made. Like, I was like, Mike, I love you, Mike. I don't know if but he convinced me about it. And like, we decided on like, it's going to be a thing that's more about like the bands, like the family of bands on the label.
Cool.
And how everyone's interconnected. Cause like almost everyone on Gilead knows people in the other bands, has toured with people in the other bands. Like it's a very close knit, like family of bands. It really feels like when we would do Gilead Fest or we do Migration Fest, that I do with Dave from 20 Bucks Spin, of course. It feels like a fucking family reunion. Like all these bands know each other. And that's really like why I booked them, is to just bring everyone together in one place and chill and hang out. So I was like, all right, Mike, let's do, like, I like your idea now. Let's do it about this. So he recorded all the Gilead bands at Migration Fest 2018, the last one that we did. And he did a bunch of interviews with almost everyone from the label that, like, you know, was from like the past 10 years, you know, like everyone that's kind of like relevant to the growth and history of the label. And he's working on editing down like a bunch of footage that, you know, people that are.
Yeah. So it's like an ongoing kind of like thing about really the community that has really popped up around the label, which is really kind of goes back to that hardcore thing or whatever. Like, you're now one of the people who's made their own little world, right? Like for somebody, you know, some 15-year-old kid might, you know, be like, oh, cool, I got a Mutilation Rights record or a Thou record. And now I'm looking through all this and like, well, I'm starting to see this interconnected thing. And you're there. Like, I think a lot of the things that you set out to do, and the people that, you know, like Hydra Head and other folks that you were trying to kind of model and build off. So we got a minute left, man. So I just want to say thank you. I know sometimes this flies by. We'll get you back on once we can kind of get some more releases under the belt. I look forward to everything that you're doing. It's been a real pleasure, man. And thanks for joining us, and stay safe out there in Wisconsin. And maybe I'll go to fucking Appleton or whatever and chill.
Dude, Gilead Fest in 5 years when we can have festivals again.
Yeah.
It's going to be sick.
Totally. Let me know, man. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.